Greetings. My name is Logan Therrien, Chief Strategy Officer for Kieri Solutions. I'm a lead CCA. With me, I have a couple other Kieri team members. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Matt.
Yep, I'm Matt Alers. I'm the CMMC Assessment Manager here at Kieri Solutions, and I am also a lead CCA.
Thanks, Matt. Brittney.
Hi, my name is Brittney Billups. I am a CCA here at Kieri, and I have been doing assessments pretty much weekly since the beginning of the year.
All right. Thank you both for joining me this morning. And I think so. The purpose of this meeting, right, or the time together, is to talk about pre-assessment phase of CMMC formal assessments and kind of what we see the hiccups are for OSCs that come in to prepare for an assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so really what we're going to focus on today, kind of short video, asset categorization. Kieri Solutions does have a 7-part series on scoping. So we're not going to dig too deep on the intricacies of scoping, because there are already those there, and you know, we can provide some links for those. It's not consulting. It is what we would accept as assessors, what is taught in the courses. So it's something you can use and still work with us and be on the same page of what the expectations are. So references that we use as assessors in the ecosystem, these are important to know, especially if you're going to be going through a formal assessment. We want to be on the same page. You should understand what we understand and what we're looking at. And it's also an indicator if you're not having any level of familiarity with these documents, there may be some gaps in your preparation for an assessment. So 32 CFR Part 170, that is the CMMC program. That is the regulation that provides a lot of the intricacies of what we do, whether it's scoping, responsibilities from the OSC, the C3PO, and then the processes that are required throughout the CMMC evaluation from beginning to end. The scoping guide level 2, that is at the DoD-CIO website for CMMC resources. This is kind of a compilation of 171 and NIST 800 171 and 171 alpha with a little bit of additional detail for the assessment process. So there's the scoping guide and there's the assessment guide, and both of those are kind of hand in hand on how to prepare and how things are going to be looked at from the OSC side, and then how an assessor can use a roadmap to get through the assessment. The NIST ASB 800 171 DoD assessment methodology. Again, this is one that's kind of it's kind of unknown if you haven't been in the ecosystem for a while, but it's a major part of the process. It talks about how many points each one of the requirements are worth, and then assessment methodology, right? What's the expectation? So it's important for us as a C3PO to understand what the DoD process is as well. And then the CMMC Assessment Process, the CAP version 2.0. This is a publication by CyberAB. That they are our accreditation entity that authorizes to do our jobs, that validate that we as a C3PO are competent in our abilities and abide by ethics and do the right thing for OSCs. So there's really five phases to the CMMC assessment process, and you can find these and each minor step. It's not an instruction or a checklist, but it is a procedure that we have to follow for each phase. There's really 5, but 4 are the major phases. The preliminary proceedings can be broken down into just contract negotiation, understanding what your environment is, making sure we have all the right data. And then we go into phase 1, which is conduct a pre-assessment. And this is the big one where we can catch a lot of issues and make sure we have a thorough understanding of your environment prior to starting the assessment. Once we move into assess the conformity of security requirements, we're in it. So it's important that we communicate early and often throughout this pre-assessment process that we understand your environment before we move into the next step. So I'm going to state this in probably each one of these little mini videos, but it's important to understand it, and that is why I'm going to do it. So in phase 1, the C3PO will evaluate the OSC as adequately prepared for the assessment of its implementation of CMMC Level 2 security requirements. The C3PO should not be able to arrive at a reasonable expectation that you have addressed security requirements without regard to evaluating the adequacy or sufficiency of implementation. So really what to get out of this is that we're not going to be able to determine if you fail or pass. During that pre-assessment phase, the purpose is to validate you have the documentation to move forward. It's to validate that you have the SSP, that you have everything that we need. So when we go into day one, we can pick up the roadmap and figure out how you do all this stuff. And then we can ask the right questions and then certify you and verify that we have adequate and sufficient evidence to say you have met all the security requirements. All right, and then so kind of moving into asset categorization. This is straight out of the CMMC assessment process. The lead CCA shall validate the OSC's level 2 assessment scope in accordance with 32 CFR 170.19, and that's level 2 scoping, right? So that's in the regulation that that CFR part 170.19, and it is pulled out of that and then put into that scoping guide provided by the CIO, DoD CIO. And this is, I believe this one's directly out of the CFR, but it's the same thing that's in that scoping guide. So Matt and Brittney, feel free to chime in, maybe with any experiences, if anything triggers maybe a memory of something that occurred during one of your scoping calls. Maybe an error or an issue that an OSC or a misunderstanding that the OSC may have had with the categorization. I know I've certainly seen some.
Yeah, we see a lot with CRMAs. That one is a tough one because people want to look at CRMAs as, let's take this off of the assessment plate. Let's categorize it in this way, and they won't have to look at it or whatever the case may be. But ultimately, they're responsible for protecting those assets the same as their CUI assets. And I think it's important to look at charts like this and really look at what's required. What are you supposed to be doing? Once we get into that scoping and we see that you've miscategorized some of these, that'll pause your assessment potentially, especially if the scope is large enough that you have to recategorize 500 assets or 600 assets. And then you have to make sure they're protected as such. When we want to look at these CRMAs, there's a little bit of a different process in a CUI asset, but they're protected the same, right? And if during the assessment we find that they're not, that can cause a delay or cause a problem in the assessment. So it's important to categorize correctly. It's what keeps things moving smoothly.
Right on. Yeah, and I do see where some OCs appear to come to the table, and it appears that they are not familiar with this at all. There's new names, and that doesn't work. But at that point we have, I almost feel like an obligation to say this is not right. I don't want to move you to that next phase, but we certainly have an opportunity to help guide you to the right processes, procedures, support teams that can help you get there. But again, this is only just to validate we understand the scope. And if it's not categorized, we can't understand that scope, right? If it's not categorized appropriately. For instance, I've seen ones that it doesn't say SPA or CRMA, it just says CUI asset, non-CUI asset. As an assessor, I can't do anything with that non-CUI asset if it's in that information system. It has to be one of these labels here on the screen. Mm-hmm. But you're right on, and I think the easy ones are CUI asset. All right, does a process store transmit CUI? It's a CUI asset. Right? I gotta do 110 things and then answer 320 questions. Right? I gotta identify something. I got to and then show how I do it per the way I identify it or define it. And then, but that CRMA. This is where I absolutely have seen this before too, Matt and Brittney. I'm not sure of your experience. But I'm fairly certain that you've seen something similar too, just because there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding in the ecosystem, and it's going to grow and develop, but this is where we are. And again, it's important right here to see, this is really cut off. I wish there was another line here, but if you notice that there's 4 requirements, and they're all the same for the OSA, for the protection of those assets, right? So yeah, we'll dive deeper in our scoping videos that we provided, but it's really about level of effort, right? There's some companies out there that have thousands and thousands of assets, and it would be unrealistic to go well and run realistic, maybe even unnecessary, to put the burden on those OSCs to have us evaluate 20,000 assets, right? So if you are protecting all of those and only 500 of those 20,000 assets are used to process, store, transmit CUI, and there's logical or there's actually, I'll just go by the wording, assets that can but are not intended to process, store, transmit CUI because of security policy, procedures, and practices in place. And then again, we're probably going to be looking for technical, right? How are you doing this? There's a history of administrative actions that have failed. But if you're also kind of quick answer on that though is if you're doing 110 things, there's some technical controls in there, right? So this is a confusion that I see too, is that if it's a CRMA, I don't need to do the same as I do for my CUI assets. Therefore, administratively, we just tell people not to do stuff. And there's, again, if you go look at the issues that are happening today, and you'll see that is just not working. So they're not required to be physically or logically separated from CUI assets, but there should be a way to talk to us on how you control those as CRMA, right? And this is where the confusion lies. It's a little bit of the wording, and there's a lot of words, certainly a lot of words. But if sufficiently documented, do not assess against other CMMC security requirements. Again, this is for time. If I've gone through your SSP and I've validated that you've met all the requirements for the CUI assets, and you say, hey, we do the same thing for CRMA, but we also have a method, a policy in place, maybe technical policy, or a procedure that prevents those other folks from pulling the CUI onto that other asset. Okay, understand, right? Let's move on. I'm not going to take the time to go look at those other 20 or 19,500 assets. I have what I need. I believe you. I have adequate and sufficient evidence to validate that you are doing what you said you are doing. And then now we can keep the assessment within a week. It's not going to go 6 months, right? I don't have to bring another 40 people in and then triple the rate to pay all those people that I bring in on the assessment. Right, so this is really important. Again, that's CRMA doesn't just necessarily mean it's not out of scope, right? It's in scope. It has to be protected by the OSA, but the reduction on the level of effort is on the assessor, on your C3PAO, right?
But they can be spot checked too. Don't forget, if during your assessment it's found that these are perhaps not really CRMA assets because of those limited checks, it could change your scope mid-assessment too. It can be found that some of these are CUI assets.
Yeah, 100%. And that's right there. We talk about it. If it's not sufficiently documented, then we can start looking at it, right? It's going to be a limited check. And then, I think the big thing to understand here though is if we do this limited check and we find out you're not doing the things to protect it, right? You're not meeting those requirements, those 110 requirements, the ones that we looked at. Again, not 110, but we'll spot check. Then we can pull the string a little bit further. At some point, we're going to stop pulling the string if it's not being met. And if you fail that CRMA asset, you fail that requirement across the board, right? That's important to understand. It's not, all right, well, this is different. This could be handled differently. If you fail one of the requirements for CRMA, it fails it for the CUI side too. It's across the board. Brittney, do you have any experiences with this or anything there?
Yes, the most frequent one I see with a problem are CRMAs. And then I've also occasionally seen the miscategorization of specialized assets, usually related to legacy systems. They're classified as CUI assets. And once we get down and dig into it a little further and they say they can't, configure them a certain way due to them not being able to process things appropriately, that's when we kind of get back to, okay, they're actually specialized assets. So I've seen that one as well.
Right, and that's a good day for the OSC, right? Where actually this is
figuring it out.
Yeah, this probably fits more in this category. Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely agree. And so, yeah, and again, it's a lot of words. It's a lot of understanding, and we do this 40 hours a week, and we're still learning, and we have a very good peer group that we can bounce things off of. We have the Cyber AB that we bounce that information off of, and the questions. Cyber AB is working with the DoD, so we can get answers that you probably just don't get because you're wearing 5 other hats as the OSC, right? So, you're running an IT department, you're running you're trying to get the training department. You're trying to develop the CMMC program, but again, you don't have a team that's doing this for 40 hours. So I think what's to get out of that is when you come to that pre-assessment time and we raise these issues, maybe just listen to us, right? We don't want to see you fail. That's not our why. We want to see you succeed. We want to see you do good things for the Department of Defense with the taxpayers' money, and see our warfighters go fight a good fight, right? And be prepared. And we take that opportunity during this phase to say, here's what we think might be a concern, right? And we provide this as detailed findings and gives you the opportunity to look at it and address. So security protection assets, I still see where, excuse me, I still see where there's a level of misunderstanding on this one as well. And if, again, I'm going to point right here, there's 4 line items here, and it's the same for CRMA and same for CUI. However, that is for the OSC, right? The organization seeking certification. The only reduced burden on security protection assets is on the C3PAO, right? To reduce the time, the cost, and get OSCs through the certification process. The Department of Defense has accepted the risk that we're only going to evaluate relevant security requirements, right? So if we're talking about the scene, right, your scene tool, we're not going to start questioning about the training for the folks that are running your scene if they're external service provider. We're not going to ask them about their background investigations or the personal screening or those things. We're only going to ask, does it do the logs like it's supposed to, right? How is it set up to take those logs? Relevant security requirements. However, you're still responsible as the OSC to validate those things are happening, right? So there's a difference between SPA and CRMA. We're not going to go any deeper. We're just going to take a look at it. Did it meet the intent? Is it meeting the assessment objective? Yes. No. All right, moving on. We're not going to pull strings on this very much. And it's right there in black and white. So again, it's good to understand the rules of engagement. This is what we're using. You should be using the same thing. And if you have questions, you can reach out to your favorite consultant, your favorite CMMC consultant that is reputable, has a good history of success, is certified, the things they need to be certified. Where can you find that? Probably in the 32 CFR Part 170 that has the certification requirements. So anything to add to this matter, Brittney?
I think that's all I have for now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think there's one more section, and it's the best one, out of scope assets.
Favorite. Yeah.
So again, four kind of good levels here. Assets that cannot process, store, or transmit CUI, and do not provide security protection for CUI assets, right? So really 2 things there. If it cannot do that and does not do that, then we could call it out of scope, right? If it's a dumb device and it has no purpose other than for processing information or providing security, then it can be out of scope. If it's not connected to the information system, it can be out of scope. Physically or logically separated from CUI assets, right? Assets that fall into any in-scope asset category cannot be considered an out-of-scope asset, right? So that's important. And then here's one that it was a breath of fresh air when it was added to this. And I know it was a long conversation, but it's good to finally be in here. And we're seeing a lot of success from this too. Any endpoint hosting a VDI client configured to not allow processing, storage, transmission of CUI beyond the keyboard, mouse sent to the VDI client is considered out of scope, right? So if you're uncertain what that means, again, if you have a favorite company that you're working with for your information system, there's requirements for VDI, right? There's really just that data is not on the endpoint. You have to prove it. You can't have clipboard. You can't be able to do screen captures, right? There's a slew of other things that have to occur, but basically the data cannot be on that endpoint, and you call it out of scope. I have seen that really help OSCs get through an assessment. Anytime you can reduce your scope, it will probably reduce your level of effort, reduce your manpower, reduce the assessment time. So that's always an option. Doesn't work for some, and that's okay. You can still pass an assessment. But again, this is just a huge win to have this in the document when it was published. So that is all I have for this topic today. Anything, Matt or team, before we break?
That's it for
I
me.
I do want to just kind of like touch on the VDI thing one more time. Just when I've been in assessments, we will dig down. And so just I want to reinforce that, verify that your environment truly is configured for VDI environment, keyboard, mouse, input, video input. That is my only thing I want to reinforce.
Yeah, no, that's great. Seeing that too. Yeah, make sure before you do your assessment, it's always a good idea to give yourself a self-assessment and validate these things. And again, if there's something that you don't know how to present to your assessor or something you don't know how to answer while you're doing that self-assessment, get help, right? That's the best way to do it. These things are expensive, and it might be more cost friendly to get the help in the beginning rather than seek help after the assessment. All right, team. Thanks for your time today, and I look forward to doing more assessments with you here soon.
Thanks, Logan.
Thank you.